Welcome, everyone. Thank you so much for joining. Tonight, we have a panel conversation about our multidimensional reality, about our personal ET contact experiences. And for those who don't know me, I am Jenna Layden, the founder of Star Family Wisdom, and we'll do introductions properly in just a moment. But I'm here with Sinéad Whelehan and Nadi Hana, my two friends and colleagues who are also experiencers of supernatural phenomenon and ET contact. So tonight we're going to be sharing a bit about our personal experiences because it's time to have this conversation. It's time to break down barriers around these topics. It's time to shed fear around these topics and to talk about the benevolence of our reality, our universe, and what we can learn from these experiences. So this will be a dialogue and conversation where we'll be covering a handful of topics in addition to our personal experiences, a few of those being what's going on with disclosure and why is this not a more prominent talked about topic, and how people make contact with ETs and what's going on with the ET contact phenomenon on a larger scale. So thank you for joining. I am going to have Sinéad and Nadi introduce themselves, and then I will introduce myself properly as well, and then we'll get the conversation started. So Sinéad, please take it away.
Thanks, Jenna. Thanks so much for having me, by the way. It's really great to be here and to be with you and Nadi having this conversation. So to introduce myself, I am relatively newer to the field, I guess you could say, having met Grant Cameron about 2.5 years ago, very accidentally, and it was quite a charismatic meeting. And he suggested that we begin working together. And so I became a researcher and an interviewer with him. And that's what really helped me get really deeply into the field very, very quickly. And that felt like a guided meeting, absolutely. So prior to that, I had not been in ufology at all. I was not following this field or anything about it whatsoever. And I had a massive awakening in 2019 that was given to me by ETs. They proved that to me later on when I asked for proof. So there's been some very significant events that have helped me to jump headfirst into this field without having asked, as far as I know, in this lifetime. But I am also a lifelong experiencer. I've had a lot of unusual experiences since I was a very little girl, and never really understood them, never was able to understand them because, where do we put that information in the reality that we know? And how many people are having these conversations? It just doesn't really happen. So that's why I think this important conversation tonight is so valuable for people who are going to be listening. And so I feel like I'm a lifelong experiencer of various phenomena that I won't go into detail with right now. Had a huge awakening in 2019 that led me to Grant Cameron. And here I am with you guys now, having moved on further into the field to do different personal work and different professional work as well. And so I'm excited to be here starting some of that with the two of you tonight.
Wonderful. Thanks, Sinéad. And Nadi, would you like to introduce yourself? You're muted.
I am. There we go. Hi. It's so wonderful to be here with you both. This is one of my favorite topics. And I'm excited that the topic in general is broadening in the audience and the participation because I like being involved in changing the narrative around our extraterrestrial family and community. So my efforts to change that narrative, I believe, started when I was practicing psychotherapy in the mental health profession about a decade ago. And I worked a lot with one-on-one and group sessions, and it gave me just a really great orientation towards the group process and towards allowing exploration of non-consensus reality experiences. So I love holding a container for the unknown, for what we're moving into, and really creating support and support groups and support rooms, because we're pioneers and we're in this together and we don't want to feel alone. And the phenomenon has been so stigmatized, and I believe that's really a way we can change the narrative, is normalizing and considering that we are having extraordinary experiences and we're not crazy. So So I moved from working in the mental health field. I was quite complete with an agenda of diagnosing and pathologizing, and I took a leap into the world of holistic health and energy medicine and yoga and unified physics and sacred geometry. And I spent about a decade with my own exploration and expansion that was rooted in personal work. And I started having experiences with crop circles that helped me connect to a lot of the advanced civilizations. I have opened my channels and connect regularly with Arcturians and cetaceans, whales and dolphins, and many, many star family. I feel an affiliation with the Andromedans and with the Mantids as well. So many, I couldn't list them all right now, but I work in interdimensional realms with guides and consciousness, different groups, different fields. I don't want to just throw the word quantum around, but a lot of times it's nameless, but I know that it's source consciousness, and working in general to support an understanding of our multidimensionality. So that's my passion, and I totally, the other thing, that was it, the hybridization program. I'm really, really passionate about embracing a new understanding about how hybrids and star kids are here to help humanity evolve and, the amazing beings that they are. That's me.
Thank you, Nadi, and a good teaser for those who are not familiar with the hybrid program or Star Kids. We'll touch on that a bit later. And I just want to reflect on the fact that we are so lucky to have you two on the planet, and it is so important that we have people who have the experience and credentials and expertise that you two bring to this field. So Sinead, your background in public education, and Nadi, your background in psychotherapy is critical for navigating these conversations in a way that helps reduce fear and helps bring credibility to this topic. So thank you for lending your voice to this topic. It's important. And I'm Jenna Layden, again, founder of Star Family Wisdom, and also a former global vice president for Whole Foods Market, where I spent over a decade working in the natural and organic food industry to focus on health and wellness and conscious capitalism. And I started having what Nadi would call extraordinary experiences. We need to reframe supernatural to extraordinary experiences. I started having those experiences about 4 or 5 years ago when my spiritual awakening began. And those experiences included ET contact, which we'll talk about tonight. So once I got to a place where I felt really grounded and comfortable in my understanding of the phenomenon, my understanding of how the universe works, my understanding of what Nadi talked about around unified physics and energy and geometry, I felt like I could come forward and share my perspective and share my experiences. Because again, I think it's important that we have these sorts of open, grounded, mature conversations about what's going on, and that we help people understand this this part of our reality, because it will at some point be a much bigger part of our reality, and we've got to help people come along, and we've got to help people get to a place where we can embrace open contact. So it's one of my passions to talk about these topics. I am an avid researcher of consciousness studies, of energy, how the universe works, and have done a plethora of studying on the ET contact phenomenon itself, partially to validate my own experiences, but also to be able to share, what I have seen and been able to kind of connect the dots on across many bodies of knowledge. So Tonight, we're going to share a little more about our personal experiences, to talk about what ET contact is like and how does it happen, and is it scary? Is it not scary? Like, what do people need to know about this? So maybe Nadi, we'll start with you. You talked a little bit about crop circles activating you and activating this connection with the star races. So talk to us about how ET contact evolved for you.
Yay. Yeah. Well, the Arcturians have shared that if you are interested in sacred geometry or crop circles, if you follow a passion and a curiosity, that is a signal to the advanced races that you're interested in developing your telepathy, your fundamental sensory capacities, and they listen and they hear you. And so it's this, we've been left clues. And so when we pursue, kind of a full immersion into those studies, we're responding to activation codes that are embedded in the fundamental patterns of our universe. So full immersion is a kind way to put it. I was compulsory. It was compulsory. I was all in, and I just surrounded myself with crop circles and images of crop circles, sacred geometry. I was drawing and I started teaching it. I just wanted it everywhere because, unbeknownst to me at the time, it was creating a sense of alignment within my system. And that alignment allowed me to listen to my guidance and begin to hear the circle makers and begin to hear the subtle levels of communication that advanced civilizations work within. And so I was unwittingly developing my capacity for telepathy. And so I started learning the language and the subtleties and the synchronicities. And so we have this idea that ET contact is some, lightning bolt. And for me, it was really subtle. My system can't handle a blowout. I needed little crumbs. And so I had dedicated practices because I'm very excited about being in other worlds in addition to the third dimension. And so meditating daily and drawing and activating and all sorts of other tools of activation, these allowed me to observe the subtleties and then begin to talk and listen and understand that we have interspecies communication right here on the planet. If you want to tune into the whales and dolphins, for example, they are a way of building our capacity to communicate in nonlinear, non-human, limited structures. So mine was subtle. It was, subtle and not so subtle. And I don't want to go on. There'll be other opportunities. But I also, Sinead, had an encounter with an interdimensional being that does exist on the third dimension. And that also opened me up to some very direct conversation and communication with, I would say, Arcturians were my main guide in the beginning. So that's where I'll start.
Awesome. Thanks, Nadi. And we'll shift over to Sinead for a few minutes so she can share her contact experiences. And it's interesting that the three of us have some kind of shared experience here, because my ET contact began as telepathic contact, which we'll talk about in a minute. But Sinead's contact has been like seeing actual beings, which has been pretty cool. Sinead's had some of that. So maybe Sinead, you can share a bit about your experience. You're muted.
Thank you very much. I was clicking my water bottle and I didn't want that to be distracting. So yeah, that's been the latest phase, and that seems to be the latest development, is they're starting to show up. I wouldn't say physically. I think they're just showing up in a way that I visually am seeing them in this field, right? But my contact with them started a really long time ago, and meaning when I was 4, but I'm still piecing that together, because there's actually a quotation that I stumbled on recently that I really like by the former, well, you probably know who he is, Soren Kierkegaard, who a man of great wisdom, died a long time ago, was a philosopher, was involved in psychology, was involved in all kinds of studies of the mind. He said that life is lived going forwards, but we learn life by going backwards. And that is so true. I found that the more I reflect backwards on what has happened to me, as well as moving forward through it, the more understanding I gain. And so I feel like I'm kind of going in two directions. I'm reflecting on what's already occurred and putting pieces together and learning from them and having aha moments, which are also helping me further understand how things are unfolding now. So the very first paranormal experience I had was when I was 4, but I feel very distinctly, and I have many memories of this, clear, distinct memories of various periods in my life, where I just had this feeling that there was somebody there taking care of me that I couldn't see, and that they were speaking to me, like they were giving me, you know, guidance or protection messages or whatever it was. And I just had to sort of listen to that and follow it, which I wasn't always very good about doing, but initially I did. And I didn't really know what that was. I assumed it was just me, my own thoughts, right? But there was always a different feeling that came with it. And that feeling has been extremely important, because that feeling has been, it is so particular and so distinctive that it's a marker for me. It's become an anchor for me and a way for me to recognize when I am having contact, because there's a very particular vibration and feeling of energy. And it feels like there's energy language that's occurring. It's not words, but it's a full language, full thoughts, full messages are communicated. So for me, the communication has been both telepathic and energy vibration. And then also I've had periods of different experiences. Like I had a very extended experience when I was a child of having very frequent ESP and seeing the future. And then the future would occur exactly as I had seen it. And I mean, exactly, like down to someone's facial expression and the clothing that they were wearing and what was in the background, you know. So that happened a lot for a long time. Then there was another phase of getting really enormous downloads, like huge downloads, you know, of really big concepts and really big ideas that no 9-year-old normally thinks about, I don't think, you know. So again, it would always come with this energy. It would come with this very distinctive feeling. It would be something like an electrical kind of experience. And so, you know, these experiences through my life, along with also, I think, coming into this lifetime with certain qualities that made me very sensitive, which was very difficult to experience in many ways, but also made me more able to tune in and made me very self-reflective, curious about human nature. I feel like I kind of came in with these things where I was already at a point coming into this life where I wanted to understand more. You know, I knew there was this feeling of more. There's more than what we see around us all the time. There's more going on behind conversations, you know, behind what people say, behind what we see. And so I think all of these things have been snowballing through my life, leading me to be on a very distinct, you know, committed journey of self-development and self-improvement. I started when I was very young as well. I started journaling when I was 10. I put myself in therapy when I was 15 years old. You know, I lived in a Buddhist temple and I was going to become a monastic, gave away everything I owned. You know, I've done a lot of different things to seek and to try to learn and try to find whatever this more was. And so all this really hardcore journeying and exploring alongside the paranormal experiences and the sensitivities and the intuition, all that stuff, I think set the stage for the ETs really making it clear that they were showing up, like being ready to show up for me in a way that I think I was more likely to be able to take in and understand, right? So the first time was in Peru in 2017, where I was brought into a UFO very briefly, and then was outside of it again, I met this whole crowd of light beings who were, I mean, it was just an extraordinary experience that came along with all kinds of other things that happened. I saw huge winged beings. It absolutely changed my life. Just that experience alone. And I love travel. So Peru also really did something to me, just being in another country that has such a special vibration. But that experience was really, really impactful, because I thought, why am I seeing ETs and UFOs? Like, I could have seen anything. I could have seen dragons. I could have seen, I don't know, whatever, but I saw this. What is it about this that, you know, why did this particular thing show up for me? And so that's what really kind of started my process of question, or being a bit more open to ETs and UFOs being closer to me in my life, I guess, because I'd always thought that they were real. I've always felt that the universe is a massive, enormous, mysterious place. It is not possible that we are the only planet that has any quote unquote civilization and quote unquote intelligence, right? I'm saying that with a little bit of tongue in cheek there, because I'm not sure how civilized we really are and how intelligent we, you know, I think we've got a ways to go yet. But there's just so much life out there. It seemed impossible to me that we would be the only ones. However, they weren't part of my life that I knew of. Then was invited into this UFO, met these light beings, and then 2 years later, almost exactly 2 years later, was given this absolutely massive awakening after watching the Bob Lazar documentary, Bob Lazar in Area 51. And I had never seen anything like that before. It blew my mind. I immediately believed him. And so I was just kind of like this about the documentary, just thinking, wow. So I think being in that wow state, and also just having had surgery, because trauma of various kinds is sometimes helpful for making a connection. That's another topic. But I had literally just had surgery and I was in this wow state. And then boom, right after the documentary, I got this enormous awakening that came with very clear, very firm communication, telepathic and energetic and vibrational. It was extremely intense. And just unmistakable, absolutely unmistakable that it was ETs telling me, okay, we're here. We've always been here. It's now time for you to know that we're here, a meeting with me, right? And you need to now get going. Like, this is your life purpose. This is what you're here for. This is your reason for being in this lifetime. And you really need to get going on this now. That's basically what the gist of it was. And it just immediately made perfect sense. It immediately, you know, it just felt incredibly true, you know, more true than maybe anything had ever felt for me. And so I was just in, you know, very much in that incredible experience and digesting it, thinking about it, journaling, writing, researching, pulling up information anywhere I could find it. And that sort of led me on a path of eventually having more and more contact. So my contact is pretty ongoing. They show up when I ask them to, essentially, and often when I don't ask them to, they just let me know that they're there in various ways. And they're giving me, they're kind of unspooling this thread of narrative as they guide me through this life, where they're giving me more and more guidance and advice about where I need to go and what I need to do and what my job is. So they're, I think, driving that point home by doing things like showing up so that I can actually see them. And so one showed up in August this past summer in front of me about 10 or 12 feet away during a CE5 presentation with 50 people sitting behind me in the broad light of day. I just couldn't believe it. And this being gave me an energy merge, and it told me that it was giving me an energy merge. And that went on for hours and hours. Then later on that night, they showed up in photographs. They're just showing up in a wider and wider variety of ways so that they're becoming more and more part of my life. And it's always positive. It might be very overwhelming. It might be intense, but it always comes with this feeling of love, support, guidance, kindness, calmness. There's this real calm, grounded, very centered core feeling. And so it's always a positive experience, always. And even from the time I was very little, I wasn't scared. So I can't explain that. That's just always how it's felt to me. And I think that your mindset has a lot to do with what you attract towards you. But I also think that because I did a lot of really hard personal work on myself, I kind of made it easier for them to get in contact with me. I very much believe in it being a partnership. I think that we have to do our part in order for them to do theirs as well. Yeah.
I totally agree. And thank you for sharing that part about how you never felt fear, you know, even in those intense moments, even when it was a little overwhelming, there wasn't this aspect of intense fear. And I've felt that too. And, you know, my background's a little different in that I didn't realize I was having experiences until, much later in my life. But similar to Sinead and Nadi, I've always been a more highly sensitive person, but just wasn't that aware of what that even was until I went through my spiritual awakening. So I had a very early career in leadership, and that, progressed really quickly for me, resulting in me becoming a, VP by the age of 30. And some of that had to do with the fact that I was processing information on other levels, that I was, picking up on information telepathically. I was able to kind of anticipate and see future events before they would occur. And a lot of that was very subtle for a long time until it just started to increase and open up more and more and more, to the point where, it became undeniable that some sort of experiences were happening. And so I too have had, some of that extrasensory, perception and the ability to, kind of access, different parts of our reality. And I think, similar to Nadi's experience with, not being able to handle kind of a big, big experience all at once, I had a lot of little experiences that led me to a place where I could finally acknowledge the reality that we're not alone. And I would be open enough to start to have actual contact experiences that I could consciously process and integrate. So, my spiritual awakening started with more of the kind of extrasensory, perception really opening up and acknowledging the fact that, yes, psychic abilities are real, right? Like, we're all connected energetically. Humans can see the past and see the future. All that's real. And once I got to that point where I had acknowledged that, then it clicked on, and it really started for me. And I'll say, my first experience, it took me a long time to realize it was an ET contact experience, because, I was kind of about halfway through my spiritual awakening and was, open to the idea of guides, spiritual beings, right? Being in another realm, perhaps interacting with us. And I started receiving messages in my head and very clearly knew they were not me. They were not my thought patterns. They were not my consciousness. And the messages were essentially directing me, giving me guidance. And at the time I thought, well, maybe this is just an angel or a guide, but it continued to happen. And I've also always been very curious, right, about the fact that, there's this UFO phenomenon. There's a lot of questions around it. I always thought it was so absurd, right, to think that we would perhaps be alone in the universe, right? Like, that seems kind of outrageous, right? Knowing how big the universe is. And so I was always curious, right, about space and the idea of extraterrestrial life, and always aligned with that. And so, as I started getting more and more curious about that, similar to Sinead, kind of getting more into the field of ufology and, some ET research, I had a couple of very kind of prominent, extraordinary experiences where I realized I was accessing some soul memories. Like, I was accessing another part of myself that wanted to be acknowledged. And I was remembering where my soul had been, where my soul has incarnated. I was remembering this kind of much more expansive part of our reality that had been blocked off, for me up until a certain age. And it's important, I think, for people to know that my background was atheist. I was atheist and very, logical, analytical minded for so many years, until these experiences started to happen, until these experiences forced me to acknowledge that what I had been taught and the belief system I had developed no longer matched what I was experiencing in my reality. So I had a couple of moments where, some deeper memories were being triggered. And there was a period where I thought, I had probably been abducted, and I felt like I needed to go through, with a past life regression to access those soul memories, and to access my subconscious mind and to see what was suppressed that was trying to come out. And so I went through a past life regression, and that helped explain a lot of the experiences I was having, both the, telepathic contact and these messages that were coming through, and also the, kind of triggering moments, right, of soul memories coming through. And in that regression, in the session with the therapist, we not only, accessed my soul memories, right? My higher self, my subconscious, which is normal in a regression. But in the latter part of the regression, when I was in a really deep state of consciousness, my star family, the ETs with whom I have a soul connection, right, from other lives, started to channel through me. So the beings that had been, telepathically communicating with me spoke through me during the regression and validated, a lot of what had come through up until that point. So that was something, I wasn't quite ready for at that point, but was ready enough. And so, I think it's really important, for people to understand that while, the very early kind of cases of ET contact seemed very scary, right? Because they centered around the abduction phenomenon. There are so many cases like ours that have been gentle and have been guiding and have been working to help us evolve and expand our consciousness to a point where we could accept and integrate and sit with, right, this reality in a new way. And so I've found it just beautiful, really, to have gone through that experience and to have kind of witnessed and felt that benevolence, right? And that sense of family. I call my star family, right? The ETs with whom I'm connected, to me are my star family, because on a soul level, we are like family. On a soul level, we know each other really intimately and deeply, and we've had all these experiences together. But in this lifetime, we just happen to be incarnating in different places, and we just happen to be working together on this particular quote unquote mission, here on Earth, to help people understand what is possible. And so I think that's beautiful, when you really kind of view it from that perspective. One thing I'd love both of your perspectives on is kind of the spiritual nature of our reality, and how that for a person is, an important foundation in understanding all of the aspects of ET contact, right? So before a person can even get to a point where this sort of contact is happening, like what sort of foundation needs to be there? Nadi?
Well, I mean, you could start by, I'm in agreement, a foundation of some kind really creates an ability to navigate, the other realms. And also set up an emotional stability, and an orientation to, to have a strong enough egoic state, right, that you can traverse non-egoic states and experiencing yourself as other aspects on the ships and in other solar systems and galaxies. So, I share decades of inner work experience with you both. It's I actually believe it's so fundamental that you really can't have, well, you can't say can't, but I believe at least that without some kind of spiritual foundation or energetic practice or ability to meditate and go within, contact is, it's not going to be as fruitful and as beneficial. We'll put it that way. It's not that it can't happen, because psychic access can look like a lot of different things. But the thing is that Sinead, a minute ago, you were like, well, I'm being a little tongue-in-cheek because, you know, humans, I think we're a little primitive. I think you should have heaped it on a lot more. like we are such babies. We are in infancy in terms of psychic capacities and the abilities to navigate the universe. And so without some kind of basic way to stay connected to yourself as you're going off into the ships, or as you're speaking telepathically with another being that's downloading you with information, you've got to be able to have stay connected to yourself. And so I moved back east for 12 years to study in an ashram with a teacher, and I developed my energetic capacities, you know, through breath work, through open-eyed meditation and energy work. And I mean, it's been 25 years I've been working on myself and my inner awareness. And, you know, it really takes a sense of self to be able to differentiate when these other beings are so psychically immense and can be very intrusive, you know, to know your boundaries, to be able to set firm limitations and say, no, you're not welcome in my psychic space until you've been invited. These take a level of self-awareness, you know, that I'm part of the choir. I think it's necessary. I think it's fundamental. And again, it's not to say you can't have ET contact experiences without a developed inner sense of self, but it might not go as well. So to really learn to integrate the intelligence that they want to share and be able to contribute, like, how do I want to say it? Incorporate into your consciousness, into your humanness, to take yourself to the next level, to really be able to maximize on the advanced intelligence that's out there. That's the motivation for inner work, is to really be able to take in what they have to share with us. You know, our systems are so small. I'm just share this last piece. There's a channel, Bashar, he's been doing, Daryl Anka channels an entity named Bashar, and he's a contact specialist from the SSANI. And Bashar, Daryl Anka, was being interviewed, and the interviewer asked Bashar how much of Daryl he is able to access in order to let Bashar come in. And this is a fully flowing channel with lots of access to information. And Bashar said that he uses 4% of Daryl Anka, right? And so number one, we do our inner work to try to at least get to 4%, right? And number two, to same, incorporate these huge energies. You know, we are so in our infancy. It requires self-awareness. It requires protection. You have to know all of these things to navigate these big worlds. Absolutely. Yeah.
So meditation is a big one, and doing that inner work, right, to evolve ourselves to a place where we can sit with this and hold the energetics of what is happening. I would also just add, you know, that's a nervous system regulation, right? And I had a very dysregulated nervous system for years until I started meditation practices, until I started yoga, until I started really consciously working on regulating my nervous system to be able to even have an experience like this without my fear response kicking in, right? And so for me, that, you know, is a really big part of my journey. Sinead, I would love for you to answer this question. Since Nadi just mentioned Bashar, I want to briefly explain one of my contact experiences that I failed to mention. This was as I was, you know, starting to acknowledge something's happening here. I think there's, you know, something extraordinary going on, but what is it? I was watching Daryl Anka's documentary. It's called First Contact. I highly recommend it for anyone who's interested in this topic, anyone who's interested in psychic channeling. And Daryl does a lot of research on psychic channeling in the documentary, but I was about halfway through this documentary about his channeling Bashar, and I was still in this skeptical place, right? I was still like, no, really? This can't be real. And I turned it off. I had ordered food for delivery like a little bit before starting the documentary. Right as I turned off the documentary, my food arrived at the door and I got a text message on my phone that said, "Your food has been delivered by Bashar." So in that moment, yeah, right? Like that woke me up. That was a moment that was kind of undeniable. I won't go into all the details of what happened after, but long story short, in my regression, we did verify that yes, that was an official contact scenario that was happening because I was being a little stubborn and I needed to continue learning. So that occurred.
Can I jump on that really quick? I just want to really emphasize, we have these glorified images of what contact is, right?
Mhm.
And I'm so glad you mentioned that, because I think we could step up our game and start to consider synchronicities as contact.
Yeah.
Because it's subtle, and their level of advancement is working with our psychology and what we can and can't digest. So they come in these gentle ways of like, what are the odds of your delivery person, right? But that is contact, either dimensional or intelligence. So I love that you brought that in. That's one of my favorite stories of you. So anyway, just to reframe contact, right? That's part of our conversation here, is it can be gentle and even have a sense of humor, sometimes. Yeah.
Yeah, I love the sense of humor part. Jenna and I were just talking about that earlier today. The sense of humor it really is so real. It is so there. It is so much part of my contact experience, your contact experiences, that of many people. And, it's been one of the most helpful lessons that I've learned from them and from others that I think I've been in contact with in my life, that, we need to laugh at ourselves. We need to laugh at the absurdity of life. We need to laugh at the absurdity of being human, and not take all of this so seriously, because this is it's not everything we think that it is, but it really is not. And we have to let go of how attached we are, I think, to the physical and the material of this dimension, and to the ideas that we are so entrenched within, as part of our way of operating in this system. We're so attached to these ideas and we get so serious, and our ego is really up in that, right? Like our ego is like, no, my opinions are right and my ideas are right and these other people are wrong. But all that stuff inherently really doesn't matter. And being able to laugh is so incredibly important. Plus, it's a high vibration experience. And if you have more joy and more laughter and more pleasure and more all of that in your life, your vibration is typically higher. And then you get to have more contact. I mean, all of these things, I totally agree with the two of you. It's not about, just going to a giant C5 that's being hosted by Stephen Greer, and then that's how contact is going to happen. I mean, there are so many ways, multitudinous ways, endless ways of experiencing contact. And it doesn't only have to be with our star family and friends. It can be with all the other beings that are around us as well, that we also can't see. That's a slightly different topic, but contact can happen in so many different ways. And, one of the downloads that I got when I was a kid was that each one of us is a whole universe, right? And I just, that was one of the ones that really, really, really stayed with me, because my mind just went, like, I understood in that moment, oh my God, I am endless. Oh, each one of us is endless. Oh, and then everything just started to expand more and more and more and more. But I'm highlighting that mostly because when we realize how much expansiveness and endlessness and eternity exists within us, not our physical body, right? Our energetic consciousness, that really is who we are, in my opinion. Then we can travel anywhere. If we go in, we can travel anywhere. We can learn everything. We can, it's all, I believe, in here. And I believe that is a big part of what allows the contact to happen, is that spiritual practice that you're talking about, Nadi and Jenna, and how essential that is for contact, but also connecting with the part of ourselves that is the universe, right? Where all the source comes from, where all of the contact comes from. It is all essentially from the same seed. So people think that contact is about going out, right? And being outside and looking for it out there, looking for it out in the sky. But it can show up as the delivery guy at your front door. It can show up in so many different ways. And I think that having a sense of humor and being open and being receptive is, it sounds so simple, but it really has so much depth. Just those practices of joy and laughter and being open and receptive, just those two different things, bring such a huge amount in. Like, we don't even need to be sitting and meditating in a corner for 5 hours every day to make something happen. There are people who spend a lifetime doing that and nothing happens for them, right? It's just about those subtle inner things that we do, and the subtle things we do in our everyday life, as well as the big practices too. What do you guys think about that, actually? What is your, it sounds like we've already spoken to it, but if there are more thoughts.
Yeah, no, I love the idea that, you know, synchronicity is meant to guide us, right? That when we are living in a way that is high vibrational and we are evolving, synchronicity will show up to guide us. Like, that is an organizing principle of the universe. And, you know, I think for me, it took a lot of synchronicities to get to a point where I was just able to acknowledge that finally, right? That this actually is a normal thing. Like, this is something we should all be experiencing in an ideal, you know, state, right? But so many of us, right, have had trauma or the heaviness, right, of this world that has held us back from experiencing some of that. And so I think, you know, that brings us back to that, like, inner world and inner work, right, that is so important to focus on so that we can allow ourselves to open to that. Something I said on Star Family Wisdom not long ago was the fact that we got it all wrong, right? Like, all this time we've been putting up these, you know, radio discs and antennas, right? Hoping we'd catch a signal from, you know, an extraterrestrial race, and we're sending messages and signals out. And contact technology is not radio, right? Contact technology is consciousness. And most all of the advanced, you know, civilizations out there understand that, right? Consciousness is energy. Energy is everywhere. It's all connected. And so we can utilize that consciousness connection, right, to explore the universe and explore these, you know, relationships that are possible.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and I'll add one more piece. You know, we're just echoing what so many have said, you know, that contact out there is really about contact. It happens first when we contact within. And I think I mentioned that I work with the whales and the dolphins and their methods of communication. And Lissa Royal Halt channeled information from the cetacean nation and Syrians as well. And the whales really, their first guidance is that we have to connect with ourselves. We actually won't, you know, and one argument could be made that true contact will not happen until you connect with yourself. But other more nefarious influences could be reaching out and presenting themselves as contact. But if you haven't developed that discernment and that ability within yourself, you could be going around thinking you've had, you know, you're being guided and led by any number of influences and energies. You know, we are in our infancy, so it's just primary to connect, and that contact comes first within, you know, and they're so excited. You know, the minute they have a clue that we want that and that we know to go inward, the support is just so right there for that relationship to be there. That's been my experience anyway.
Oh, yeah. Me too.
And so many, you know, of the contact cases, even the abduction cases, right, which are the more extreme kind of scary, you know, scenarios people have experienced, even so many of those give way to this reduction in fear, this understanding of what they have to offer and the lessons and teachings, right, that the star races have to offer us. And it appears, right, that all of them, most of them, you know, at least all of the benevolent ones, you know, who are interacting with planet Earth are rooting for us, right? They want us to get out of this current time we're in, right? We're in this critical point. You know, we can see it, right, all around us. We've got a lot of things to resolve on the planet for us to evolve in a really positive way. And they want that for us, right? They're guiding us, right, through crop circles, through these contact experiences, through the messages people have received, you know, during abduction experiences, so that we can choose a better way forward, right? So that we can remember there's a different way to do things, right? That we don't have to be in competition. We don't have to, rely on violence as a means to an end, right? We can work in harmony. We can, come back to a balanced state, right? In ourselves and without. And that's what they're teaching, right? They're teaching these, beautiful things that, in my mind, really only have our best interest in mind, right? And like Nadi said, there's, the good and bad, right? There's both ends of the spectrum out there. That's the nature of our universe. But it appears to me as though we have a lot more supporters out there than we've realized.
Yeah, I agree. And I think it's really, going back to how the importance of having a relationship with self. It really is about, I think that part of the importance is, when you have a relationship with yourself, I feel everything else comes from that. And if you don't have a relationship with yourself and you have another experience that could be jarring or could be wonderful, if you don't have anywhere solid to put that in yourself, it doesn't serve much of a purpose for you anyway, right? It might just be an experience that's amazing or scary at the time and then passes and moves on. But we want these things to land. We want these things, we want to learn from life. We want to be able to progress and grow, those of us that are on the spiritual path anyway. That's what all of this is for, right? Is to learn and to become better. I used to think it was to become better human beings, but I think it's to become better consciously, like to develop our consciousness. And that whatever kind of being we end up reincarnating as is, I think, kind of irrelevant, overall, because it's all about the consciousness, which is not the brain, right? We know the consciousness is not even the mind, really. It's so much more than that. It's our universal self. It's all of what we are and have ever been. So it's a concept that is very ineffable, right? It's very difficult. You can't possibly cohesively explain what that really is. But on the journey of discovering that and trying to help that develop and progress and get to higher levels of consciousness, we have to take personal responsibility. We have to really own all of who we are, which is the so-called good and the so-called bad. And I think if we're able to do that in ourselves, then we're, as Nadi was talking about, we're much more able to move through life and have all these different experiences, including unusual or scary or startling experiences, and be able to make better use of them. So I do think that mindset has a lot to do with the kind of contact we experience and what we're able to make of it, right? How we're able to use it to progress so that it doesn't become a blip in time that we're left wondering about for the rest of our lives. It's a mystery still in many ways, but it's a mystery that is understandable step by step by step as we move along, right? It keeps revealing itself to us because it wants to. And because we want it to, we want to, if we want to experience and know these things, then we can. It's right there. And I didn't realize, how easy that was. Not that it's easy, it's taken many decades of hard work, but the fact that I didn't realize how present it is in my life, right? Until I started getting this very distinct guidance. So I think we're very attached to kind of giving ourselves a hard time and having a hard time and making things difficult on Earth. It seems to be a big part of our, very strange to me, human behavior, that it's much easier for us. It seems to be easier for us to go the more difficult route. Yeah. If that makes sense. We keep choosing the more difficult route. And I'm sort of fascinated by that because the other choice is also always there. So, why is it that so many of us keep choosing this? I think it's all about going inside, doing that, all these things that we've talked about already, to be able to get enough awareness to be able to recognize these opportunities and open one door or the other.
Yeah, it's like what you said, it's mindset, right? It's knowing that your thoughts and actions and which door you're choosing, right, is going to create your reality. And, humans have been so conditioned, right, for the hard, negative, traumatic experiences, right, that we've created and continue to live through, that it becomes difficult, right, to make that shift. And so that's why, we keep referencing like all the years, right, of work, around our internal space and our mindset. And that's big work, for humanity right now to face our shadows, right? To face, the negative, right, that we've created, and to shift that. But it's so cool too, how the ETs and star races teach about mindset. They teach about creating our reality. They reinforce, a lot of what, we're talking about today based on my research, right? That they're guiding us in that way to help us understand that we have those two choices available to us, right? That we can choose, to put our thoughts and actions in one direction or a different direction. And it's our choice, and every race, every civilization gets to make that choice and see what the outcome is. So hopefully we, through these conversations and this sort of work that we're doing and so many people are doing, my vision is that we do triumph and get to the other side of this tough period we're in. What do you both think about where we're headed? And maybe we'll kind of end on that note. Why hasn't open contact, open disclosure happened? What comes next for us?
Oh, Nadi, do you want to start?
That's a big one.
Sure. I feel like, the question of why, when open contact, why hasn't it, this kind of thing. I believe that's a direct reflection of our level of unpreparedness. We're not ready, and that's fairly self-evident in terms of our response to basic human interactions with amongst ourselves, but also many of the races have said that plainly, that we couldn't handle it, and I firmly believe that. And I like that this conversation, it feels soft and gentle to me in the conversation, right? Where we've moved from the very, very abrupt, intrusive, traumatic abductions into, understanding that the understanding is developed. Anyway, we've moved from these very intense experiences through an integration phase to learn from those and try to figure out what was going on, and doing research, the Edgar Mitchell Foundation for Research of Extraordinary Extraterrestrial Experiences. We've got documentation now. We've had enough experiencers learn that there are soul contracts between experiencers, that, our future selves have come back to give us messages about our own evolutionary process. So we've gone from these blunt experiences and progressing towards this understanding that it can look like anything, that contact is really actually very diverse, that it has to do not only with extraterrestrial beings, but also interdimensional beings and parallel realities and future selves and simultaneity. And we're really broadening our understanding of us, transcending the limitations of the third dimension. So I'm just enjoying that we've been able to get to this soft place of this conversation. And it is built on the shoulders of people who have had tremendous trauma and struggle to understand the larger picture. And that's what we're all going for. And that's what I believe, that's what our galactic family is going for too, is understanding the larger picture, our purpose in the universe, our relationship to the Galactic Federation and our place in it. And that's just what I'm appreciating about this. And in terms of the idea of open contact, I say we just get that off the table. I say we just shift the language into personal contacts, because it happens in the way that people are ready for, and it can look like so many things. And really, conversations like this are about promoting receptivity, and that's what you need for whatever it's going to look like. So open contact, I don't know if we've earned the right, but yeah, one-on-one basis, we can say yes, please.
Well said. I get impatient. I'm ready for the ships to be in the sky, right?
Wow.
No, we need this period of integration, of readiness, of preparing. Yeah.
And they are here. Also, we know that, right? Like Jenna and I are in Sedona, and I just had, I did a very big weekend of intergalactic work with a group of people, and I'm just looking around going, I'm not seeing them with my 3D eyes, but I am aware of the ships that are here. There's a very heavy concentration here. And so when you have more of that knowledge of like, oh, the ships are right here, and there's parties happening with, when we want to, so there's ways to get there, even though they can't and won't come here yet.
Yeah, I'm totally with that. I mean, going back to the word disclosure again, I feel two things, two answers. One is that, yeah, they are here, as you're saying, Nadi, they're here right now all the time. And we have to be, the more we learn about the human experience and quantum physics and, actual science and also esoterics and metaphysics and other things, and intuition and psychic ability, all of this is all part of the whole of understanding our experience and where we're going and where we've been. So we're interested in these things and we start learning about them. Then you start to realize that perception plays a very big part in what we experience as well, right? Because we're seeing with our minds, which depends on our level of consciousness and our level of awareness, but we're also seeing with our human eyes. And there's a lot of things around us all the time. This is proven by science. People need proof. So I'm saying this for that reason. This is proven by science that, there are a lot of things around us that we cannot see because the human eye is not able to observe them. They're not able to perceive them. So if we know that within this little 3D reality, why can't that also be true on a much bigger scale? Like that just makes complete sense to me. So that's point one. Point two is that I think it's interesting that people, and very telling about our reality and the way we've been conditioned, that people think that disclosure is only real if the government does it, right? But why? Why does it have to be the government? I feel like disclosure has already happened. It's happened on the ground to millions of people already, and our community knows that, right? So this is not a secret. There are secrets that are being kept from us by the government, sure. But I mean, all of it is also out there. And all we have to do is look and find those people who have that knowledge and have that information and look for experiencers, because there's bajillions of us all over the world. And we're able to connect because of the internet and, the communities that we're building, and also this shifting tide in awareness and need, right? People are starting to value things differently. They're starting to need different substance, different kind of life, a lot of people on this planet and in this dimension. So I think disclosure is here. I don't think we need the government to tell us that it's real, or even I would love to see a gigantic fleet of ships, Jenna, as you want to see. I would love that. But I feel like it's not entirely necessary for those of us who are already on this path. Like we're not, like Nadi was saying, it's happening. It's happening for us anyway. And we get to share it with so many other people, right? So I feel like it's not something that we have to wait for or something that's going to come. It is already happening. It is here now. Yeah.
I totally agree. And I also think it requires this period of readiness, right? Before a government could even say anything about the topic without, some sort of panic or freak out. We've got to go through this period of kind of this citizen disclosure, right? And these experiences happening and us understanding more about how the universe works and all of that. And I actually think the governments will not disclose it. I think the human race will get to a point where that readiness period has marinated enough, right? Where we've integrated enough, there's been enough experience, enough, evidence about how the universe works presented to enough people, that then they will show up down the road, not in the next year, but I think we'll actually just skip over the government saying anything about it.
I just think it's being necessary. I just really don't. And also, why is it the US government that has to do it? I mean, if you look at the disclosure that's already happened, most of the countries in the world, including China, have already said, the government had already said, we are having contact with UFOs, we have been researching them, or they have been seen, or whatever, however they worded it. They've already done that. So, the US government doing this or not doing this is not the be all and the end all for the entire global community. I think it's so funny how we were talking earlier about having a sense of humor and laughing at the absurdity of how human behavior works. I think this is one of those examples. We give the US government and governments in general so much power and influence that I see it as us disowning our own power and influence, right? Like claiming our power and claiming what we can do with it has nothing to do with what's happening around us, what other people are doing. It's all about as you were mentioning earlier, Jenna, creating our own reality. And we have so much more power to do that than we realize that we do.
Yeah. And the reality is, if we are going to step into this new world, right, this new reality that includes communion with the star races and all of that, it requires all of the governments being on the same page, right? Like, it's like the movie Arrival, right? Where we're not going to get to that milestone of open contact until we, on the whole, can work together on planet Earth, right? To come to an agreed upon point of view, an agreed upon, perspective on how we would approach this. And so I think, like, that's a necessity, for a true open contact scenario to happen. So hopefully that is happening behind the scenes, and there's some readiness happening on that level while us citizens are preparing ourselves as well. So with that, thank you both for joining. This has been such a fun conversation. If there's anything you would like to close out with, any words of wisdom, final thoughts, please share, and we'll wrap it up.
It's just been lovely to be a part of the conversation. Thanks for hosting, and I'm happy to be on the team.
Me too. You did a wonderful job of hosting, Jenna. Thank you so much. And if I'm going to say one last thing, it would just be, if you have the feeling that there is more, it's because there's more. And keep looking, keep going, keep seeking. Don't give up. The challenges happen for a reason. The scary things happen for a reason. Stresses happen for a reason. They are just as valuable teachers as all the pleasant, wonderful stuff too. And have a sense of humor, but keep seeking.
Beautifully said. Thank you, Sinead. Okay, thank you everyone for tuning in and watching. We're so grateful to have had this conversation and to share our thoughts with you. This is the first of many conversations. There's so much to explore on this topic. So we are excited to share more with you soon. Bye for now.